Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen Johnston, and I am the Student Opportunity Act Coordinator. And I want to welcome everyone and just say that the goal of today's webinar is to provide districts with an overview of the FY23 SOA Progress Report and offer some instructions and guidance for completing it. You've already preempted this next comment, but today's webinar and the accompanying slide deck will serve as your primary guidance resource as you prepare your report, and we will be sending the slide deck out following the webinar to all superintendents. If you are not the superintendent of your district, you will be able to get a copy from that person. And as Becca mentioned, it will be posted on the SOA District Resources page of our website. So during the webinar, I'm gonna give you a little bit more of a welcome than I've done already. We're gonna do a little bit of framing and background for as a reminder of why districts are preparing and developing and implementing student opportunity acts and providing progress reports. And then we'll spend the bulk of our time actually walking through this year's template. And then towards the end, we'll cover some information about supports that are available to districts during this progress report reporting phase in case anyone needs assistance along the way. And then we'll offer an opportunity for districts to ask questions. I would also encourage you to drop your questions into the chat all along the way, because other folks on the SOA team may be able to answer them while I'm going through the rest of the slides. So one of the first things I wanted to do is to introduce or have you meet some of DESE's team, because I'm the person that a lot of people connect with most of the time, but a lot of supports go into this from other people. So I just want to acknowledge Becca Shore and Erica Champagne. I'm just going to call out names to save time. Allison Stevens, Moira Connolly, Michael Seymour, Andrea Ricotta, Susan Fisher. Who did I forget? Anyone? So there are a lot of people, there are a lot of hands involved in getting this work done, and a lot of people available to provide you with supports during this process. And I wanted to just say a quick word about the progress report. We see this as a really terrific opportunity for districts to step back and reflect on all the work that's gone into their implementation of their plans over the past year. And it offers a chance to celebrate both wins both large and small, and where you've run into implementation challenges, to pause and think strategically about how to make adjustments to address them. And if you haven't done so already, I'd invite you to drop your name and district. And as I said already, just put your questions in the chat all along the way. And now on to a little bit of framing and background. So ultimately, the overarching goal of the Student Opportunity Act is to ensure that every student in the Commonwealth has access to a high quality public education, regardless of the zip code that they come from. And ultimately, the Act is a recognition that some of our districts have been historically underfunded. And the goal, a key goal, one of them was to fund them equitably. And then so that's reflected in the fiscal challenges at the top of the page. And the state made major new investments in education over the 7 years that the Student Opportunity Act is being phased in, or the funding that's behind it. The state plans to put in well over $1 billion in additional ongoing fund to support education. And as many of you know, it also included a revised funding formula that better reflects equitable distribution of state education funds. Alongside of the fiscal changes that are embedded in the legislation, there are some policy updates, and there's a focus on closing gaps for student groups that are least well served in the state. In particular, the legislation calls out students with disabilities, students with who are English learners and students with students from low income backgrounds. And one of the things that the legislation calls for is for every district in the Commonwealth to develop a gap closing plan, because this is our shared work. Every, or most, I shouldn't say every district, but most districts do see gaps for some of their students, even if they're, if you're performing above the state in all areas. A lot of times when we look at disaggregate data within a district, we can see students with disabilities and English learners are not always experiencing the same learning opportunities as other students, and that can lead to outcomes that aren't as good, or where there are gaps in outcomes for different groups. So the plans that you've put together over the past year and are implementing now are designed to really, oops, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I didn't know I could do that. Are really designed to reflect the ways in which your district has determined are the best ways to close gaps in your district. I wanted to share with you a little bit about what we're learning from your plans, because in addition to having an individual plan for each of your districts that your stakeholders and others can take a look at, we have been able to aggregate some of that data. And so we can see that the plans are targeting the student groups that the legislation intended them to target. And generally districts are, districts who are getting more than $1.5 million tend to serve or include more student groups in their plans. And then districts that are receiving less than 1.5 million, which is often sort of the cutoff that we use, we're working with or targeting 3 student groups on average. And then we just wanted to give you a sense. Another thing we can see is that the evidence-based program areas that districts see as most important in terms of gap closing for them. 40% of districts are focusing on implementation of high-quality instructional materials, inclusion co-teaching, addressing SEL and mental health. And we have that information for all 21, but wanted to highlight for you today some of the ones that are most prominently selected by different districts. And then this is a quick look. As you may recall, anyone who's done who did the FY22 amendment report knows that we asked you to tell us about how you were using funds across multiple funding sources, how you were using funds to handle like the full implementation. And so these numbers, for instance, in HQIM, districts told us that $74 million plus is being invested in supporting that kind of implementation. And those funds come from ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, local funding, other federal grants, and so on. And I just also wanted to share a few examples of how we at DESE are using the data. I already showed you a couple of slides that it gives us that statewide snapshot of what district priorities are, what's being implemented, and how resources are utilized. We use it as a data source as we engage in planning and resource development. For instance, we recently used information from the plans to inform decisions we made about the recent evidence-based program grant that many of you, well, hopefully many of you here in the room applied for, that it's underway now. And it's also a useful reference for offices working with individual districts. Our statewide system of support team, for instance, often familiarizes themselves with those plans as they do their targeted district-facing work in partnership with those districts. And with that, hang on. I just want to talk a little bit or head us into the FY23 Progress Report template. I think I meant to put this in the previous section. I'm proud of the web page that we developed with all of your plans in them. And so we wanted you to know that here's where you can look at an individual district, including your own, if you want to take a look at what's in it, or if you're curious about how other districts are approaching this work. So before we actually start rolling out what the template looks like, we just want to give you some of our best advice as you move forward. We're going to recommend that you prepare as much of your progress report offline as possible, and you'll better appreciate this recommendation as we walk through the template. We've prepared fairly comprehensive guidance within the online template, but we think it will be easier if you work from like this slide deck, which we will be providing to you, and screenshots, which include screenshots of the template, because when I get to the technical issues or some of the technical features of the template, you'll understand better why it might make sense to do it offline. So we also recommend that you assemble the progress monitoring data that you are using to assess the implementation and impact of the EBPs in your plans, because you want to have them on hand as you think about like what you're going to tell us, what your district story is about progress you're making, and what you want to share with your stakeholders. We're also going to recommend that you work with your school business manager to respond to the budget items that we're going to be describing for you later today. And then again, we're just going to recommend that you consult the guidance all along the way. Hang on one second. So in the template itself, there are 6 different sections that you're going to be working with. There's a brief narrative update on progress to date. That's a new section. We'll spend more time on that than we do on some of the other sections. Anywhere you see an issue that a section that doesn't just say new section, this is going to look really familiar to you from filling out the SOA FY22 amendment. In section 2, we're going to ask you for updated information, implementation detail for each of your evidence-based program areas. Section 3 asks for updated budget information on FY23 expenditures for each EBP. And then there's a new item for other uses of additional Chapter 70 funds. This is a new section. We'll spend quite a bit of time on this. Quite a few districts are not likely to need to fill out this section. It's essentially for districts that don't use don't use all of their FY23, excuse me, local funds, and we want to provide better information for stakeholders like legislators and other folks who are interested in this. I'm going to apologize and try to pause for a minute and ask Becca or Erica to see if they can find out about another link that districts might be using, or to send Cheryl Rabbit the correct link to today's webinar.
We are on it.
Thank you so much. And then finally, we're going to be asking you to provide updated information on progress in engaging family and caregivers, an update on stakeholder engagement in plan development and implementation. And these will be very similar to what you did for us. You did in last year's plan amendment. So here are some technical features that you need to be aware of as you work online. Unique district links with logins were sent out early this afternoon to every superintendent in the state, with the exception of charter schools. I don't know if there are any charter school districts online, but you are working on a different timeline. Your updates will be due later, and so you won't get a link at this time. The other thing you need to know is that only one person at a time can enter data into the template. So while if you have a project person doing one part of the template and someone from your school business office handling something else, you can share the login data with them, but they just can't be working in the template at the same time. Your progress is going to be automatically saved whenever you hit the next button. And whenever you hit the next button. One of the things that you need to know about this, though, is that you hit the next button at the end of each section. So there are 6 sections in the template. If you hit the next button while you're in the middle of a section, it's not gonna, if you don't hit the next button, it's not gonna save the data on that page, and you will end up having to re-enter it. And when you're ready to go back into the district and add more data, you'll simply click the same link and it will take you directly to the first blank page in your template. And from there, you can either go back to other parts of the template or you can continue moving forward and adding data. The template won't let you skip from section to section. So that means that everything has to be entered in sequential order. And you won't be able to progress until all items in that section are completed. A red asterisk will indicate that the item is required. And just as a heads up, we wanted to let you know that some sections of the template are going to allow you to import and view data that you provided in your amendment last April. And it's optional to use that. It's as a courtesy or giving you another way to look at the, like if you're in the online template and you want to look at something, like refer to it, you can pull it right into the template while you're working. I will mention now that for districts that have 3 or more evidence-based program areas in their plans, you may actually find it more useful to just open another window and have your plan open from the SOA dashboard. And that'll also make more sense as we walk through the template and I describe different features. So once you log in, you clicked your link, you're going to confirm your district's name and provide your contact information. And as I mentioned, emails went out this morning from Alchemer with links to the template. We encourage districts to look in their spam mailboxes, and we will follow up with a subsequent email that includes this slide deck. And we'll repeat the link for districts because we know that sometimes because of districts' systems, web systems, it's sometimes like seen as spam and it doesn't even end up in your spam folder. It just doesn't get delivered. But we want you to be on the lookout for that. So this is just a feature that's added in this year's template for your convenience. You can look at a page that has a summary of key SOA plan elements that are in your FY22 amendment. And the page will show you the evidence-based program areas in your plan, the student groups targeted by each plan, and the metrics you plan to use. So you'll see a screen like this. You can either use the drop-down menu to select your district, or there's also a search feature once you click on the arrow and you can just type in the name of your district and then navigate to the evidence-based program list. And you'll see something like this. So this district included these 3 EBPs, number 1, 3, and 11, the expanded access to full day, high quality pre-kindergarten, as well as the other 2 listed. And number 1 is highlighted right now. I'm not sure you can tell that, but it's highlighted. And the student group section simply tells you, okay, for this EBP, these are the student groups being targeted. And these are the metrics we plan to use to assess progress as we implement. this work. And if you click on the early college program, these will change. The student groups and metrics will change to reflect the student groups that a district says they're targeting for that EBP, and the metrics. And obviously you'd expect the metrics for pre-kindergarten to be quite different from the ones that would be used for early college. And again, that's just for your information. If you're not interested in using it, you can just click the next button and get started with the first section of the progress report,
Okay, stop it.
which is your summary of progress to date. And this is an open-ended question. And essentially, you're going to be answering the question, like, what evidence have you seen that your implementation of EBPs is leading to the desired gap closing for targeted students? We want you to just keep in mind as you shape your district story, keep in mind that your primary audience is your local stakeholders. We think it makes sense to keep it succinct, clear, and easy to digest. And at the same time, be sure to include some specific examples drawn from your progress monitoring data to support your narrative. So we're going to ask you to lead with evidence of gap closing outcomes for targeted students, and make sure you can explain how those outcomes are connected to or flow from the implementation of the EBPs in your plan, and address any implementation successes or challenges that impact your outcomes. Now, I underlined evidence and gap closing because I just wanted to say a couple of things here. Evidence means more than looking at MCAS scores, and I only say that because I know that sometimes, or in my experience, districts and schools sometimes assume like that's the only thing we're interested in. And while that is a long-term goal, or it's an indicator that we want to look at over time, at this point in your implementation, your best data reflecting gap closing may very well come from other sources of evidence. This could be some, depending on your the EBP, it may be classroom observation data, it might be local assessments, or it might be student perception data. I also wanted to mention that you don't need to report on every metric listed in your plan. Remember that screen I was just showing you a second ago where you told us the metrics that you were going to use. And you can also use metrics other than the ones listed in your plan. We know from working with districts and schools that sometimes once implementation is underway, we get a better sense of what's really going to give us good information about progress that we're making. I also wanted to highlight gap closing and talk a little bit about what we mean by that. So this is just an example of reading scores for a district. These aren't real data over several school years, FY or academic year 2020 through 2023. And in this example, every student group improves over the course of several years, and that's exactly what we want. We want to know that districts are working on improving outcomes for all of their students. The Student Opportunity Act, on top of that, is interested in knowing about gap closing. How are we narrowing gaps between different student groups? And this is going to mean disaggregating student data to look at those gaps. And so in this example, you can see, like, let's say group one, let's say this is total students on the top line, and then student group one is multilingual learners, and the bottom row is students with disabilities. And you can see that over time, those scores are increasing for each group, but you can also see for the multilingual language group that the gap is closing. So what we're looking for is for you to describe those kinds of gap closing wherever you can. Okay. So moving on to the next section. I'm sorry, I did want to say one more thing about the length of, I know that some districts will have questions about, well, how long should it be? Some of that's going to depend on how many evidence-based program areas are in your plan. And we want you to know that you don't have to write about each one separately if it doesn't make sense to do that. We know that there are sometimes that evidence-based program areas aren't always mutually exclusive. For instance, if you are implementing professional learning communities for teachers and you're applying it to teachers who are implementing high quality curriculum materials, you can discuss progress in the same piece of narrative. You don't have to write a separate piece for each of them. You can do that, but you aren't required to. So moving on, in addition to this overall progress, which is at a fairly high level, we're going to ask districts to update their FY implementation of individual EBPs in their plans. And this will look familiar to folks. If you remember the implementation matrices that we had in the FY22 amendments, and it listed a lot of different program components for each of them. And we asked you to let us know where you are in the implementation process. And so this year you'll use a drop-down menu to indicate, where we haven't started this yet. We are still in the planning stage. We have partially implemented this. We have fully implemented this, or this line just simply isn't part of our approach to this EBP. And then following each matrix, you'll be asked to provide 2 or 3 sentences describing your district's immediate next steps for implementation for each EBP. And that's also what we did last year. Here's what the template will look like this year. So in this example, a district is doing research-based early literacy programs in pre-kindergarten and early elementary grades. And for like the first line, they would then go over to the drop-down menu and let us know like what stage of implementation they're currently at. And then at the bottom, there's a space where we ask you to give us the 2 or 3 sentences about next steps. And then you would like proceed on to the next EBP in your plan. And so if you had 3, you would fill out 3 different ones. And the template will automatically list the indicators for whatever EBPs are in your plan. If you're interested, before you get to that point, you will have the option of reviewing the responses that you provided last year before you put in your FY23 information. Now you can also look at this information if you simply go to the SOA dashboard and open your district's plan. But if you're in the template and you wanted to look at this while you're in there to refresh your memory about what you said for each of them, you can do that. So here is a district that picked research-based early literacy programs. And this is what they told us about their stage of implementation. And they'll be telling us where they are this year. Now, I just wanted to say a word about, we want to get a realistic picture of where districts are at in each stage. And when we're implementing something new, it often takes a long time to roll out a full implementation and to get really good. Let's say you're rolling out a new curriculum and teachers are being trained in using it, and you're spending a year or 2 looking at different looking at different aspects of implementation to make sure that teachers are implementing them with fidelity. And it may take a while for teachers to become skillful and comfortable at doing that. So that was a long way of saying it may be several years, the districts may be at partial for a number of years, and we would rather have an accurate reflection of where you are in implementation than have any district feel like they need to show that they've moved on to the next stage of implementation. We at the state level, at least, we largely use this to get a snapshot at the state level of where districts are and the different evidence-based programs that they're implementing. So moving on to the budget section, anticipated FY23 budget expenditures. This again is similar to what districts did last year. We're going to ask you, how are you braiding together funds from different sources to implement the EBPs in your plan? We're asking you here to address the full cost of implementing an EBP and not simply to tell us how the additional Chapter 70 aid that you received in FY23 is being used. This is documenting expenditures for FY23. Last year, you told us about like how you spent funds in FY22. This year, we're asking about FY23. We know the year isn't done yet, so we're just going to ask you to project out to the end of June. But we're talking about the time frame July 2022 to June 2023. And we're asking for the same information we did last year, but we're hoping that, or we think that you'll find this data entry table more intuitive and user-friendly than the one you filled out last year. It looks more like a spreadsheet, but it has the same items in it. For instance, there's a budget item, and in this, we ask you to give us, a description that's a little more, that provides a little bit more information than the foundation category in the third column. That's a big, broad area that, instructional materials for equipment and technology in this one. And then you can see if you look over to the budget item on the right that they're purchasing a screener with that. And then for a literacy coach, they're hiring 3.5 FTEs, to support instructional leadership. I did want to say a quick word about FTEs. Those columns and what we're asking for is like where you're actually applying it towards instructional staff positions. Last year, we got some information from districts where it really looked more like they would put professional development and then say 40 FTEs. And we are guessing that they were trying to tell us that 40 staff members were going to be trained in a particular professional development area. But just to be clear, it's the number of positions. And then just in these columns where it says local funds, ESSER, ESSER 2, you're just going to tell us how much you are pulling from different funding sources to how much you're spending from different funding sources to pay for that budget item. And again, if you're interested while you're in the template, if you want to go back to your FY22 budget and look at it while you're in the template, you're going to have the option of using a drop-down menu to select your district, click on budget items, and it'll take you to the EBPs that are in your plan. In this case, the district has 4 EBPs, one of which is research-based early literacy. And when the budget table is open, it tells us what they're spending it on. I had to hit the plus button to get the foundation. You have to hit the plus button to get the foundation category and then where the funds were spent. Again, you have the option, you can use this, or you can also just have your plan open from the SOA dashboard on another screen or in another window. So we just wanted to say, before you leave your budget tables, we're going to ask you to calculate the total amount in the local funds column, including Chapter 70, across all the EBPs in your plan and write down the number, because you're going to need it to complete the next section. What do we mean by that? Here's an example of this approach. So let's say your district received $4 million of additional Chapter 70 funds, including Chapter 70, I'm sorry, your district received $4 million in additional Chapter 70 funds in FY23. And in your SOA plan, you had these 3 EBPs, and here's how you allocated your funds. What we want you to do is take the this first column with the local funds and add that up. $2.8 million in locally appropriated funds were detailed in your plan, and jot that number down. And you'll be using that as we go into a new section, which is other uses of additional Chapter 70 funds in FY23. Before we talk about that table, just wanted to give you a little context about why it's being added this year. I already mentioned that the state is putting in well over $1 billion over 7 years, phasing it in. And so this represents a significant new and ongoing investment in education. Now, some districts' budget expenditures in FY22 SOA amendments reported expenditures of locally appropriated funds that was below the additional amount of Chapter 70 aid that they received in FY22. There are lots of reasons for this. The SOA plans are not comprehensive district improvement plans. We DESE asked districts to focus on just a few key EBPs that they thought would do the most to move the needle for gap closing and provide us with, some pretty detailed budget information about how they're using funds. And districts that are getting a lot of additional Chapter 70 funds are also getting more in the way of ESSER funding at an even greater order of magnitude. And that presented challenges for like how resources were going to be utilized. And the new funding also recognizes that healthcare costs for current and retired educational employees was being underestimated. And so the new funding formula adds more resources for districts to use in those areas. So like I said, there are lots of reasons why this is so, but be that as it may, the legislature and other stakeholders are looking for a more complete understanding of how additional SOA funds that have been phased in so far are being utilized. And that's what this next question is trying to get at. Now, not every district is going to have to fill this out. Based on some of the budgets that we looked at from last year, our expectation is that quite a few districts aren't going to need to provide any additional information at all. And here's how you figure out which category your district falls into. Step 1, what's the total of the FY23 budget expenditures that come from your FY23 EBP specific budgets? That's a long-winded way of saying, look at that number that we just showed you how to calculate, the one that came to $2.8 million in the example that we used. And then determine, is that amount greater than your district's FY23 Chapter 78 increase? If the answer to that is yes, you're not going to need to provide us with any additional information, and you will automatically go to the next section of the template. If the answer is no, your district will be asked to provide some additional information to help provide a snapshot of how those additional funds are used. And then I just wanted to mention, for anyone who's sitting out there saying, well, how do I know how much additional funding in Chapter 78 we got in FY23? That is available in our school finance office's website, but we are going to post a file that just has a list for each district that'll be easy for you to find on our SOA district resources page. Okay. So just from the previous example, I'll just quickly say, so let's say your district got $4 million in additional Chapter 70 aid. They've accounted for 70% of it. So this district would select no and continue to the next section. All right, this is a screenshot. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on this slide. And this is a screenshot of the table districts will be that have to provide additional information will be asked to complete. And we have some information in it already because we thought it would make more logical sense as we walked through it if it had some information in it already. However, before we do that, we want to provide a little more context about why this table or what this table is trying to do. It's intended to allow key stakeholders to get a fuller picture of how that remaining increase in Chapter 78 is being allocated in your district. This could include support for other EBPs that you didn't write about in your SOA plan. It could reflect other types of allowable expenses under Chapter 70. I think I already mentioned increases in health insurance coverage or funding claimed by your municipality for other educational expenditures, administrative expenditures. We're going to ask districts to represent as close to 100% of the amount of additional FY23 Chapter 78 your district received as possible. And we know, we understand not all expenditures are mutually exclusive. Apportioning locally appropriated funds in districts is a complex endeavor. And we're asking you to think about resource allocations in ways that probably aren't part of your standard operating procedures. We do want you to know that the information in this table is not connected in any way to the data the state uses to make accountability decisions. It's simply an effort to provide additional information that our stakeholders are asking for in order to help them understand the impact of the legislation. So we're asking you to please do your best to estimate the ways in which your district has been able to leverage additional funds afforded to you through Chapter 70 and the Student Opportunity Act. That's the end of my context part. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how you actually complete this page. So step one, if you're filling this out, every district completes row one. And every district for the first line puts in the selection from the drop-down menu. It appears first in the drop-down menu, EBPs already detailed in the SOA Progress Report. And I know we had in the previous slide, and then you have to put it like reflect as a percentage, like what percent of your additional Chapter 70 fund increase in FY23 is represented here. And I'll just go back. So in this example, this district accounted for $2.8 million, or I don't want or 70%. So as you can see in this table, we put 70% in the first line. And that's all you have to do. You can ignore the top expenditure categories in this line because your EBP specific budgets already lay this out in quite a bit of detail. Next, in lines 2 through 6, districts are going to be asked to begin with other EBPs and get an estimate of how much you're spending for that EBP and express that as a percentage as well. So the example here, this district is also doing dropout prevention and recovery programs. And they estimate that they're spending about an amount worth of about 10% of their FY23 expenditure. Then in the expenditure categories, we don't need any more dollar figures, but these just tell us, well, what kinds of things are you spending it on, like the 3 biggies. So classroom teachers, instructional materials, and professional development in this case. And then they indicated that they have, they're working on continuous improvement opportunities for teachers, let's say, to develop and support professional learning communities. And they're gonna put some money into professional development. And that's really the only thing they're spending it on. So they only have to use the drop-down menu here. And then in rows 4 and 5, we have additional staff hires that are not already reflected in EBPs. You know, we know that if like some districts are adding a lot of, or trying to add a lot of SEL and mental health staff. Let's say that wasn't in your original plan. If that was, if you are hiring folks in that area, but you haven't listed them as an EBP, you could just give a sense of how much might be allocated in this, or how much money you might be spending in this area. And then, you know, sometimes districts hang on to a portion of Chapter 70 funds to cover other education-related administrative costs. You can reflect that as a percentage of the FY23 increase. And then if that gets you up to 100%, you'll add these up. If that gets you to 100%, then you don't need to include anymore. That's it in a nutshell. And we know districts are going to have a lot of questions about that, or we anticipate you will. But again, we're asking you to simply do your best to reflect how you've been able to leverage the additional funds that are coming to your district in this question. This is just to quickly, that first column has a drop-down menu that has like 25 categories in it. Yeah, the first one is EBPs already detailed in the progress report. Then comes a list of the 21 individual SOA evidence-based program areas. And that's followed by other allowable expenditures that include, as we said, funds retained by the municipality, increased healthcare costs, additional staff hires not already reflected in EBPs, and other salary increases not already reflected in EBPs. Once you finish that section, it's on to family caregiver engagement. Again, this is very similar to what you did last year. Every district in the state was asked to complete the family caregiver engagement implementation rubrics in the FY22 plan amendment. We're simply asking districts to update that this year. And then you may recall that you were asked to indicate a metric or set of metrics that your district would use to measure progress in either improving family caregiver engagement or increasing family and caregiver engagement. This year, you're being asked to provide a brief update on what you're learning as you progress monitor that metric. This is simply a screenshot of the metric, and those are the items that are in it. These have the same drop-down menus that were in the EBP implementation section. So it was the partially implemented, fully implemented, not a component of our approach. And again, you will have the option, and I don't think I had to put a screenshot in, but you'll have the option of going back within the template if you want to, and look at what your responses were last year. I did want to mention quickly that you don't have to use the metrics. If you have a better metric or a different metric than what was reported in your plan last year, you're perfectly free to use a different metric for telling us about progress in family and caregiver engagement, so long as it, fulfills like what the legislation was trying to accomplish here, which was to learn about how that work is improving in districts. And then finally, stakeholder engagement is considered an integral and important aspect of both plan development and implementation. and districts are expected to have ongoing engagement with their stakeholders all along the way at different points. And so this year's it's just an open-ended question, asking you to describe your district's ongoing approach to engaging with them and answer these 3 questions. How is your district sharing updates? Like, how are you sharing information on implementation and early evidence of gap closing with different stakeholder groups? How are you collecting data and input from stakeholder groups, different stakeholder groups? And what kinds of substantive input and feedback has your district gotten from different stakeholder groups since you submitted your FY22 plan amendment last year? And how has that input affected your plan implementation? We're also, as a reminder, we want to make sure that you include a focus on specific feedback from stakeholders representing the student groups targeted for gap closing. This could be the students themselves. It could be family and caregivers representing those students, community partners, and so on. And just at this point, I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the kinds of supports that you can expect from our team as you're working on your progress reports. Last year, we offered half-hour consultations with SOA team members. We talked to about 30 districts last year, and we will be putting a link on our district resources page that offers you an opportunity. You click on the link and then you look for when there's an availability. You click on that and we'll send you an invitation for a consultation. And no question is too large or small. Sometimes last year districts just wanted to say, hey, am I doing this right? And other times districts had media issues that we worked through together and provided them with more clarity and information. And so our team members are standing by to do that again this year. And that will be available beginning the week after winter break, and it'll last through the entire month of March. You can always email questions to the SOAplans@mass.gov. A lot of times I'll be the one who is responding to those, but other people besides me have access to that mailbox, and it gives us the potential, it allows us to get back to districts more quickly if it goes to that email address. I'm going to encourage you to keep checking our SOA district resources page. And also, if you're not the superintendent, you can also check the Commissioner's Weekly Update page, where we often will put in reminders and information that you may be interested in knowing about. I wanted to mention that DESE's partnered with Open Architects to provide free support, both for developing district goals and for ongoing progress monitoring. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 districts have taken advantage of this. And if you're interested in doing this, once you get the slide deck, you'll be able to just click on this link and let them know that you're interested in. We've gotten very positive feedback from districts who have used this resource. So we would encourage you to reach out if you think it's something that would be helpful for you. Great for disaggregating data too, is my understanding. So once plans are submitted, in case you're interested, our team will be reading plans again this year. We won't be providing the types of formal feedback memos that we did last year, but we will be following up with you directly if necessary. Some of the reasons we might reach out to you would be if there are data missing in any of the budget tables, for instance. There was quite a bit of missing data last year, or if we have any clarification questions, you may hear from us directly. And then an updated SOA dashboard that incorporates progress reports will be posted probably in the middle of the summer sometime. And I know we gave superintendents a heads up that new 3-year gap closing plans will be due in April 24. And stay tuned for more information about what that's going to look like. And at this point, I think we're ready for questions and answers. I have not been looking at the chat as we've been, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Karen, you do not need to read through the thread. I think I have answered most folks' questions either in a private chat or in the full chat. Just trying to scroll through here and make sure I didn't miss anything. I think I addressed everything. So we will share the slides. That is the most requested item, I believe. But again, we do not have like a contact list for this webinar. So it's not possible for us to just hit like reply all to this Zoom and be able to send it to you, but we will be sending it to the superintendent soon. And then there'll be something posted on the website. There's a question about the timeline to complete this progress update, and I tackled answering that one. Just wanted to make folks aware that April 1st is actually a deadline set by the statute. However, we're hoping that because this is a update to their very comprehensive amendments that were submitted last year, that this hopefully will not be as Herculean of a task that was asked upon you in FY22, that we're asking for an update, and we hope that you won't find this as labor intensive as last year, and that you'll have plenty of time to accomplish the task between now and April 3rd. If anybody has any other questions,
April 1st is a Saturday, so we actually set the due date on the Monday.
The Monday after, correct. And if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to, coming off mute, it's a little difficult with this many folks. You can be brave and try, but you also can go ahead and use the chat feature and we can voice over the question and provide an answer if possible. I also provided a link to an attachment on our finance page and the Chapter 70 page that can give you some information about the change in Chapter 78 from 22 to 23, which is something that you can use when completing that new section for us. There were some questions about that, and that number will also be included in the template when you're answering the questions around that the new question about how you what percentage of your funding is going towards different activities, if you didn't account for all of your additional Chapter 70 aid in the EBP budget tables.
Were you able to, or was anyone able to drop in the links to the SOA district resources page for?
I did not, but I kept talking about it.
Here's the SOA district resources page. Here's the dashboard if you want to take a look at your gap closing plans. There's some other information on there. And oops, for some reason it's not letting me send this.
There you go, it went through now.
Okay, and just for good measure, there's a email address with questions, and I have already been getting questions for people, so we'll look forward to hearing from you. This last year was a really nice opportunity to chat with district folks. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to wrap things up and let folks go off to their families, dinners, whatever else they have planned for this evening. And if any questions come up afterwards, you've got our contact information. We're here to help. Thank you.